So I thought I would make a video about these two Amway vacuum cleaners. Now this vacuum might look familiar if you've watched my videos. This is actually not the same vacuum that I made in that video about 5 years ago. That vacuum has since been sold to another collector. So this Amway I picked up off of Craigslist a few months ago when I was visiting a friend in Delaware. I bought it from the son of the original owner, and she was going into more advanced care, so they had no use for the machine anymore. It was definitely well used. The height adjustment system there's some piece that is either worn or broken, so I can't really raise the height adjustment up and down. The handle release is also, I wouldn't say it's broken, it's more like it's worn. So I just have to be careful because it doesn't take too much for it to release itself. So I usually prop it up against something. They also had broken this rear inspection plate, so I had to buy a new one. Fortunately, they're still available because they still make these machines. They're just called Workhorse now. And I still have to get a foam filter. The old foam filter was falling apart. Also, the hose had some tears in it, so I cut off the bad portions and I just shoved the hose back into that coupling there, and that seemed to do the trick. I also have been having some issues with the wheels falling off because the old brackets that held the wheels onto the axle broke off when I was taking the machine apart to clean it. And I got some new ones at Home Depot, but they didn't have quite the right style. So I'm probably going to have to try to find different ones that will work, because every once in a while when I'm using the machine, the wheels will fall off because of that not being held well in place. But yeah, the son of the original owner told me that she absolutely loved the machine. She had it for about 25 or so years. And her help started using it as well. So I wonder if they're actually the ones responsible for quote unquote ruining the machine. Because it always seemed, they said that she always took pretty good care of it and had it serviced periodically. She's had most of the original attachments, including as well as the manual. The rest of the tools are in here. You can see the gray hose. So for those of you who do not know the history of this machine, I can tell it in a second. You can see there's another Amway here. This is actually a CMS1000. I picked this up about a month ago, and this is actually going to be going to a collector friend of mine. Now you can see they look very similar, but they're also a little bit different. The CMS1000 has no height adjustment, and the dustbin is also smaller. And that is one thing I didn't know until I got a CMS1000, that the dustbin design was actually slightly different. The very first CMS1000 had a little bit, not a shroud, but it had an extra plastic piece around the top that extended out, but that was pretty short-lived. You can see that it's also dark gray and tan as opposed to all tan on the CMS, the Cleartrak, I should say. So basically how these machines came to be, they were made by Bissell for Amway in the late 1980s until some point in the 90s, I think probably around 1995, 1996, somewhere around there. James Dyson wanted to bring his technology to the United States market, but he didn't have the capital to build the machine himself at the time, so he approached many different appliance companies around the world to try to get one to build his product for them. and he approached Amway at some point in the 80s, probably around 1986 or so, and there was an agreement drawn up, and shortly afterwards Amway pulled out and got their money back, said, hey, we don't want to make this machine anymore. He says, all right, walks away. After that, he's working on negotiations with Iona Appliances to make the dry tech carpet powder machine. And at that point he discovers that Amway is indeed still selling the machine, and retailers such as Sears and Dyson sues them, and they still make the machine even after the lawsuit, but now they have to pay Dyson royalties. So basically these machines, you can see they're very utilitarian. These are supposed to be copies of the original Dyson vacuum cleaner, which was the Cyclone, which was made in Italy and sold in very limited numbers. So it has no shroud. It does have pre-motor filtration, which the first Dyson Cyclone machine did not have. But again, it's very primitive Cyclone technology because there's no shroud. There's not an automatic tool, suction, diverter either. It's not automatic, so you actually have to turn a dial or flip a switch, I should say, on the first model, and then it's a dial on the Cleartrak. There's no post-motor filtration, and because there's no shroud, it does let some larger particulate into the filter casing, so it's not the best for filtration. I wouldn't say it's the worst either, because at least it does still have a couple layers of filtration before the motor. They do clean carpet well. They don't have the most amount of airflow because they didn't use a super powerful motor, as the Phantoms did. The Phantoms had a dual stage motor. The Amway only has a single stage motor. But you know, I mean, considering that both of these vacuums are both 30 plus years old now, I mean, I'd say, they're still usable, and I'd say that's still pretty impressive for plastic vacuums. To get in a little more about this one, it has similar issues as this one in the sense the handle release is worn, so it doesn't really sit up on its own anymore. The glue that they use to fuse these two pieces together is actually deteriorated on this. So if I tug too hard, this actually is going to come off. So next week I think I'm going to have to go to Home Depot and get some strong adhesive to glue these two pieces back together so that doesn't happen. But again, considering how old these vacuums are, they're still usable. They still work. This one especially does have a little bit of bearing noise, but that's to be expected for a vacuum that's this old. I actually like the style of the CMS1000 a little better than the Cleartrak, just because it has like two different color design as opposed to just all one on the Cleartrak. But we'll give them both a run quick. They're an interesting part of vacuum history because they were one of the first cyclonic vacuums to be sold in the United States. And like I said before, you can still buy one of these new. They're called Workhorse. You can buy them for about $400 new on WMJrefurbishing.com. And you know, they're not for everybody, but they are still made, and they're made well. You can see, I mean, they have some broken pieces, but they've generally held up after all this time. They're very simple to take apart. And like I said, they do clean carpet well. They're not the best for floors, but if you get the extension hose, you can hook the extension hose up, and it actually makes it a halfway decent vacuum for floors if you use it as like a canister almost. So we'll give these a run quick. I'm not expecting to pick too much off this carpet. They're not terribly loud, but since it looks like I already had it plugged in, can see there's a bit of bearing noise, and my apologies. I didn't realize the vacuum was already switched on when I plugged it in. Suction wise, it's not that great. I'd say it's marginally better than an Elite, but not by much. So that's the CMS1000. It's hard for me to demonstrate the tool suction when it doesn't want to sit up on its own, but I guarantee you you're not really missing much. So just give me a second, and just gonna get this one out of the way, and then we'll take a look at the Cleartrak quick. And even, you know, for how long ago these vacuums were sold by Amway, people still like these vacuums. The person I bought this CMS1000 from, they still have another one that they use. So I don't know what it is exactly about these machines, but the people who bought them loved them. And clearly, I mean, WMJ Refurbishing must be doing at least all right if they're still around. A lot of carpet cleaning companies like these machines just because they have such a large capacity dustbin and they're relatively low maintenance. So this is the Cleartrak, which is basically an improved version of the CMS1000. So yeah, I mean, it didn't pick up much, and I wasn't expecting it to pick up much because I've used 2 different vacuums. Well, I should say technically 3 different vacuums now on this carpet tonight. But again, it's not the most powerful vacuum, but it's still an interesting part of vacuum history, considering that James Dyson did have some involvement with the design of the machine, at least when it came to the cyclone assembly. But yeah, I don't use them a lot just because I have a lot of floor in my apartment, and because the height adjustment doesn't really work, I can't really push it across a lot of my carpets. But anyway, those are my 2 Amways, or I should say my one Amway, and then this one that I'm going to be giving to a friend soon. But that's really all I have to say about the machine, so I hope you enjoyed the video.